Hi, I'm Paul Edwards. I'm the author of the Mourner's Woods book series, and first and foremost, a monster kid. And tonight I'm watching Frankenstein's Bloody Terror, a movie with 4 monsters in it, none of whom is Frankenstein. All right, in order to understand this movie, you have to go back to the 1940s when Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman was out in the theaters. And there was a young boy, a 10-year-old boy in Spain named Jacinto Molina, who saw Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman in the theater and was blown away by it. He thought this was the greatest thing he ever saw. In fact, he immediately went home and started drawing pictures of Frankenstein fighting the Wolfman. Fast forward to the 1960s. That young boy, Jacinto Molina, has grown up. And he's tried his hand at a couple of different fanboy type interests. He's tried drawing for comics and things like that. And he has an idea for a werewolf movie because he loved Lon Chaney Jr.'s character of the Wolfman in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. So he has an idea for a film that's going to be very much like a Universal Wolfman picture. And he's having trouble pitching the idea, and finally he does find a German backer for his movie idea. And they want him to not only write the movie, but to star in it. The only problem is that they don't want him to use his real name, Jacinto Molina. They think that his name sounds too Spanish, which it is a Spanish name, and they want him to come up with a stage name. So Jacinto picked the name of Paul Naschy. Paul he took from the current Pope at the time, Pope Paul VI. And Naschy was a Germanic-sounding version of a name of somebody that he knew. So Paul Naschy was this stage name that this fanboy actor would go by from here on. And in the movie, Frankenstein's Bloody Terror, there's no Frankenstein involved. I'll explain the title in just a moment. What you have is Paul Naschy's character is bitten by a werewolf and takes on the curse of the werewolf himself. And so his friends want to help him find a cure for werewolfism. And they find the records of this doctor who had these avant-garde experiments that they think might be of some help here. And so they write a letter to this doctor hoping that he'll come to their town and visit. And sure enough, soon afterwards, there's a visit from this doctor and the doctor's wife, who seem awfully young considering how old the experiments they've written about were. And the doctor explains, well, that doctor was my father. I'm the son that's carrying on his work. Well, it turns out that neither of these things is true. It is the same guy. And the reason he looks so young is that he's a vampire. And so is his wife. And they revive the werewolf who had bitten Paul Naschy's character. And they now have a rampage of monsters going on in this town where there's 2 vampires and 2 werewolves. Paul Naschy's character is, in effect, the good werewolf, although he's still a murderous monster. And I should point out that his character's name in this is Waldemar Daninsky. That's going to come into play in a minute. So what happens is that these monsters go on their rampage. Of course, the vampires are the bad monsters, and the werewolf, Paul Naschy's werewolf, has to take them down, as well as the older werewolf who had cursed him. And at the end of the picture, this is not much of a spoiler because you can see this coming a mile away as you're watching the movie. Paul Naschy's werewolf character is killed, shot with silver bullets by the woman who loves him. Okay, this was just the beginning. Waldemar Daninsky, the character that Paul Naschy played in this picture, appeared in 12 films, Paul Naschy kept making Waldemar Daninsky werewolf movies. And they weren't all in the same continuity. This is something that's hard for audiences today to wrap their heads around. Basically, he kept playing a werewolf named Waldemar Daninsky, but the werewolf would die in one movie and then inexplicably be alive again in the next movie. And not only that, his origin as a werewolf would change. In some of the movies, he was bitten by another werewolf, like he was in this picture. In other movies, he was bitten by a yeti during a trip to Tibet, and that's what turned him into a werewolf. In yet another movie, he was cursed, and it was the devil's curse that he'd become a werewolf. So there was no consistency from one movie to the other, except for the fact that there was a werewolf whose name was Waldemar Daninsky. No connection with between one movie and another. So Paul Naschy became very well known for these El Hombre Lobo films, the Wolfman films that he starred in. He also did quite a number of other horror movies, and he, like his heroes in the old monster movies, he would do his own makeup a la Lon Chaney Sr. And he came up with some monster effects that were quite good, but none really matched the fame that he got as the Wolfman, El Hombre Lobo. Now, when this film, which was released in Europe as Mark of the Werewolf, when this film was going to be released in America, the studio executive who was going to license this film and show it in the United States, he owed a Frankenstein movie under a contract that he had signed to present a double feature of Frankenstein films. And he was short one Frankenstein movie because the one that he thought he was going to get, he wound up not being able to get. So he took this monster movie, which has 2 werewolves and 2 vampires and no Frankensteins, and he tacked on a little animated bit at the beginning of the movie. And this animated bit showed the Frankenstein monster. And it said, Frankenstein, the famous family of monster makers, now has the ultimate chapter of terror in their story when they're branded with the curse of the werewolf and become Wolfstein. So the Frankenstein family is now known as the Wolfstein family because they're all werewolves. And it is true that in Mark of the Werewolf, the original werewolf, the one that bites Paul Naschy, is Imre Wolfstein. So the name is there, but he's not Dr. Frankenstein. He's not a member of the Frankenstein family. And this is just a tacked-on explanation that sort of gives them a justification to call this film Frankenstein's Bloody Terror. So you may think you're going in for a Frankenstein picture, but it's a bait and switch. You're getting plenty of werewolves, plenty of vampires too, but no Frankenstein. They used to be able to get away with a whole lot of stuff in the 60s and 70s in terms of movies. And I'll tell you, if you are a fan of vintage monsters and classic horror, if you love these, what some may consider hokey monster pictures with the werewolves, vampires, Frankenstein, and other creatures of the night, then you really ought to check out my book series, the Mourner's Woods book series. They're available on Amazon.com. I have all different monsters in different books. Each is a freestanding story. You don't have to read one book to understand another. And I really think you ought to check them out. They are available for 99 cents for an ebook, $9.99 paperback. My name is Paul Edwards. My books are the Mourner's Woods books. And I'll see you next time it's time to watch a scary movie. Thanks.